Hey guys, Nathan Duke here. I'm making my second video now. I've got a new book. I just finished it a few nights ago. This book was loaned to me by a friend of mine, Jim. He had it, thought it was something I might be interested in, gave it to me, and when I got it, I could not put it down. It is Otherland, or the Otherland series by Tad Williams. The first book in the series is called The City of Golden Shadow, and it's real good. I know last time I made a video, it was Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, sort of a brief overview, and I didn't want to do another comedic or sci-fi style book, but I've already broken my first rule, and I'm doing City of Golden Shadow. Really, really, really good book. It's interesting how it's written. Well, I'll get into that in a minute. It's, like I said, it's part of the Otherland series. I'm currently reading the second in this city, is River of Blue Fire. But I finished the first one. It was published by Daw Books, Incorporated. Interesting fact about Daw Books, they were the first publishing company to be devoted exclusively to sci-fi and fantasy. A lot of authors have published their work on there. I was looking through the list, and I found a few that I had heard of, or that I've read. And I made a list of Rachel Atwood. These are... she's a published author on Daw Books Incorporated. Sean Russell, Kristen Britton. These are all authors that I'm familiar with. And, yeah, I just thought it was interesting. The very first publishing company devoted exclusively to the sci-fi and fantasy genre of books. This book, the first in the series, is fun because the prologue of the book does not... I went into it figuring it was some type of fantasy novel. The prologue of the book is like historical fiction until things go crazy. But this book is technically a sci-fi book. It's set in the future, somewhere around the year 2089, something like that. I never know how much I'm supposed to reveal, because I don't want to give away everything, but at the same time, I want you informed as to what the book contains. Basically, in this universe, in the future, VR technology has advanced tremendously. And their version of the internet, what they just call the net, it's not online or anything, it's just the net is what it's referred to in these books. It's all done through VR headsets or implants or things like that. You log in and you've got your avatar on there, which can look like anything you want it to be. Anything you want it to be if you can afford it. Everything on the net costs money. In this VR world, but you'll see people walking around, their avatars are 30-foot tall giants. There's one that's just a yellow tornado full of flying monkeys. The Vile Tribe. Things like, it's wild. It's a really good book. How to even really describe it? Anyway, what I like about it is that it is a sci-fi novel. It's set in a virtual reality world, and real life for some of it. But it's also a fantasy. It's also a fantasy book, because of the nature of the virtual reality worlds and simulations you can get into. A lot of them are heavily influenced by fantasy. So, it's a sci-fi novel, half of which is written like a fantasy. So, it's a lot of fun to read in that respect. I mean, the nerds and the dorks all get to geek out respectively for it. So, It's a fun book. It's a long book. The version I have was like 780 some pages long. Every page of it necessary. The main characters of the books, there's Rini Suluweo, South African college teacher. Then there's Paul Jonas. Paul Jonas in this book, he has the wildest story. And it's only about halfway through the book before you realize what's going on with him. Paul Jonas, the character in this story, he's the very first character you meet, even though his arc is secondary up towards the end of the book. But all of the characters, Rini, Paul Jonas, there's a 14-year-old kid named Orlando. He has a bit of a tragic story with him, but he's a super cool character. And his online persona, his net persona, is Thargor, a barbarian from a VR video game that he plays. Then there's the possibly sinister Mr. Sellers. This book is divided up chapter by chapter by characters. So there are multiple story arcs going on through the book. The main arc, the one that we follow constantly, is Rini Suluweo's arc, and, alright, here we go. The other main character in her arc is an African bushman. Rini Suluweo is a South African, but there's a bushman, an African bushman, who is a student at the school she teaches at, and it's her job to teach him how to use the net through the medium of virtual reality and all that stuff. His name now is spelled XABBU. Now, I don't speak the language of the African bush people. I can only assume, based on what I know, his name is Zabu. Zabu. That's the best I can do, and it's not great, and I'm sure the author he'd be rolling his eyes at me to hear me try and pronounce it like that. But he's an amazing character. He's got this ancient, in the earth of the Kalahari, this ancient wisdom that he brings to a futuristic modern society. Even today, the African Bushmen are kind of a dying breed. They do still exist, but between encroachment of civilization and things like that, they're a dying breed. But in this book, set almost 100 years in the future, there are even less of them left. And Zabu is trying to learn how to exist in the modern world, as well as stay at peace and stay true to the wisdom and truth that he knows is assured in of his traditional heritage. So, yeah, really interesting characters. Again, some of them you never see outside of the other land, the VR. You learn that the net, this place called Otherland, is being built, created, simulated, and invested in by some of the most powerful people in the world. The wealthiest people in the world are secretly building this virtual reality that is so real that people who are in it can't tell the difference between it and real life. Normally, the net, as it exists in these books, as far as the everyday Joe Schmo could afford, you can tell it's a simulation. It looks super cool. The graphics are probably ahead of what we have now, but you can tell it's not real. You're obviously living in a dream world. But The Otherland project, after which this book is named, is so real that you can't tell whether you're in it or not. Whether it's real or not. There are certain things you can do, like eating, that you can decide, yeah, this isn't real. But in this, The Otherland is being sponsored, put together, and overseen by an extremely shady group of guys called the Grail Brotherhood. And they're the bad guys. They're the bad guys of this book. Terrible things start happening to random children who log into the net. They can't get out. They go comatose, or they become deathly ill, or they die. And in real life, they're just vegetables. But somehow or other, these children are being taken on the net in the virtual reality world, and that shouldn't be possible, but somehow it is, and we have reason to suspect that the Brotherhood of the Grail, or the Grail Brotherhood, that they are behind it all. And so there are a few arcs, and their arc is also in the book. These are not good people, these are terrible people, but they are also the most wealthy and powerful people on Earth. So, it's just, so they're the bad guys, and people like Rini and Zabu and everyone else is kind of caught up in the mess that they create. So, yeah, this is a really good book. I enjoyed it a lot. Because of the way it's written, it's not possible to get bored with what you're reading, because each little section is about a different set of characters. And by the end of the book, of course, there's the connection, well, maybe not of course, but there is a connection between all of them. They all end up meeting up. But you can't be bored with this book, because each little section is its own perfect little story. And so, even if what you're reading, you think, well, maybe I'm not into this particular, just push through it. Push through it, because the next bit is about something completely different. It's a really fun book to read. Great story. I love the story so much that I'm already halfway through the second book in the series. So when I finish it, I'll probably come back on here and say a little bit about it. But Tad Williams is the author. And he's a great author. I love him. This was my first book of Tad Williams's that I've read, and I love it. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. So, if you're a fan of sci-fi fiction, it's a great book. If you're a fan of fantasy, it's a great book. It kind of appeals to just the super fiction, where the rules are different, reality is different, and it's a fun read. So, I'm Nathan Duke. This book was City of Golden Shadow from the Otherland series by Tad Williams. I highly encourage you to check it out, and you have a great day.